Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics, and the cold weather has arrived. That means I'm grabbing for flannel shirts, flannel quilts. I'm grabbing for warmth. And we are continuing our just enjoyment of the Batting Buddy template set that we introduced now, I guess about 6 weeks ago, and people are enjoying making rag quilts again. These were popular, oh gosh, 20 years ago. I'm seeing quilted jackets come back. They're even the younger generations wearing them. Rag quilts are coming back. So I love that what was old is new again, because they were cool then and they're cool now. So the Batting Buddy template set makes making a rag quilt super fun and easy, even for a beginner. In our first video, and be sure to check that out, we just showed you how to put some squares together. But of course at Shabby, we have to try to take it to another level. So we thought it'd be fun to do kind of some patchwork. So today I'll be showing you how to do that. We have a pattern available for this one. This is a paid pattern. Our first video is a free download. So if you've never been introduced to this before, never made one, go ahead and grab your free download. You'll need your Batting Buddy template and of course your favorite flannel. So for the 4-patch flannel rag quilt, we do our 4-patch, and notice the seams are where they normally are on the back side. But as we sew our quilt sandwiches together, our seams are up on the top. We get to snip, we get to throw it in the washing machine and the dryer, and that's when the magic happens and all this fluffiness. I sleep under a rag quilt every night, all year round. Yes, even in the summertime, I do that. There's just something about the weight of it, the warmth of it, that just makes me feel comfortable, warm, and I have a great night's sleep. So I can't say enough about rag quilts. I think they're incredible. We do not have a kit for this. We just wanted to show you what this could look like, maybe in an Americana setting, or maybe you're making this for someone that has a favorite color. Where do you find all these lovely, warm, and cozy flannels? Right on the Shabby Fabrics website. Let me show you how to find that. Once you're on our homepage, click on Fabrics by Type Flannel. Here you're going to have so much to choose from solids to plaids to prints and so much more. Truly, it's endless, the amount of possibilities. So we know that many of you may have picked up flannel at Joann's Fabrics. So if that was your go-to before, we're now your new go-to, and we're happy to have you. We'll continue to keep looking for more flannel and make sure we keep adding to that so we have a nice full selection for you. But whatever that might be, if you're going to take the 4-patch, the first thing that you'll want to do, we'll get to our Batting Buddy shortly, but in order to make our patchwork, you'll want to cut some 5-inch squares here. And for me, because I like my plaid to be straight, some of you may not care if the plaid is a little bit wonky. I like my flannel to be absolutely, my plaid rather, to be absolutely straight. And if I can use a tool, and specifically my 5-inch Creative Grid, because I'm cutting 5-inch squares, I can now align that wherever I need to on my fabric. This is a quilt sandwich, but let me just pretend. I can now absolutely see to adjust that, like, oh, yep, I'm straight. That's my sweet spot. And now I go cut out my squares. So I love using this because I can, again, dial in that exact position, put it on my spinning mat, and cut my fabric out perfectly. So however you want to cut your 5-inch squares, for our fabric A here in our example, which is our cream, we have all of the amounts that you'll need: 64 of the cream, of the red, and of the blue. You have half that amount. That makes sense, right? Because the red happens, or excuse me, the white is happening more frequently. In each of our quilt sandwiches, we see the white every time, but the blue only half the time and the red half the time. So you get the idea. Just cut out your fabrics to the amount that are specified here. Later on, when we get ready to cut our fabrics that are the alternating, and on the back of our project, this is where we'll be using our Batting Buddy to cut those out. So we'll get to that in just a minute. Making the 4-patch is actually pretty straightforward. No big surprises here. We've done a good job. I'll just bring all of this out all at the same time. We fussy cut our plaid, simply sew 1/4 of an inch. So this is the only time in the project you're sewing with 1/4 of an inch. Later on, we're going to increase it to a full 1 inch seam allowance when we get ready to sew our quilt sandwiches together. So placing these together, sew as you'd expect, and we simply press the seams open. Get those out of the way here. Open, open. Now, we want our points to come together. How are we going to be making sure that happens, right? Obviously, you have opposite colors. I stack them right on top of each other. We have our seams pressed open. I'm using my cool pins. You normally see me on set with the Clover Extra Fine Patchwork, but working with flannel, and soon we'll be working with flannel and batting, the delicacy of the extra fine pins is they're likely to bend. This is when you want to go to a stronger gauge and even longer pin so that we have no chance of bending our pins. Pin these together really well, 1/4 inch seam allowance of course, and then we just simply pressed everything open. Makes it nice and easy for our everything to lay good and flat. So that's how you will complete your 4 patch units for here and here. Now on the back side, we have our coordinating fabric in the red, we have our coordinating plaid in the blue. For those fabrics, this is where the batting buddy is such a great tool. It does so many things for us. The first thing it does is notice on the outside, this is truly a ruler. You could cut 9.5 inch squares all day long using the perimeter of this ruler, and it still has the nice grip on that. So we simply lay this onto our flannel, and again, you can adjust that so that you're cutting very square, you're really squaring up your flannel, and you're cutting out your square. So that's the first job of the batting buddy. So let's just catch up to where we are in the pattern. Notice we have our 4 patches done. We have our our backings cut, and they're calling that the back layer. So that's kind of the nomenclature, is the back layer. We've cut all of our back layers out using the outermost portion of our batting buddy. Now we're going to use the batting buddy, but in a different way. We'll put our back layer over here, but on the front of this and not on the back of our 4 patch, we will once again lay this on top, but now we're using it not to cut around the perimeter, but as a guide that in these corners, I'm going to be marking, and I want you to mark boldly here. Because later on, when we sew our quilt sandwiches together, we will begin sewing them at these marks. Once you have these marked boldly, this is where there's a difference in the instructions that are included inside the template. Inside the template, they have you mark the instructions, have you mark from corner, just the dot to dot. But that means when you're trying to sew all these quilt sandwiches together, you have to start and stop. We like chain stitching. So we found no problem with marking corner to corner, all the way corner to corner, right through that center, in both directions. And I can still see that special mark that I made that's more bold, because later on I will be only sewing from that dot to the one in the corner. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Let me first mark these. I am using a friction pen. Highly recommend that you use a marking pen that is erasable with heat. Don't use anything permanent for this step because you'll see it. You'll see it, of course. I do want to mention that we opted to use a couple of different colors of thread. So depending on what you're sewing the project with, once we made our quilt sandwiches, we kind of got them all prepared, all pinned together, And then we went and sewed all of our red lines diagonally. We came back, we did all of our cream lines diagonally, and for the blue, of course, we did blue. That's just, if you want to get that granular like we did, go for it, or you can just maybe use a gray, which is a good neutral that seems to work with everything, and that's what I have in my machine today. So we've marked our quilt sandwich. So this is where we are right now. So you're like, okay, I've got my back layer, I have my 4-patch, and I've marked it. When does the batting come in? This is the next step of the batting buddy. Remember, it's a 2-piece template set. This is now where all of those scraps left over from all the quilts you've made, and you can't bear to throw it away, good decision. This is where you kind of get free batting, right? It's not big enough to ever go in a quilt, but it's perfect for things like this. Now I'm just going to roughly cut this piece away so that I can use this in conjunction with a spinning mat. I love it when I can just cut all the way around a shape and I never have to lift up my template. I don't have to lift up my fabric. Here, and just cut out. And you could, of course, be cutting more than one layer at a time. Now you will continue to cut your squares of your batting until you have 63 squares, because of course each one of the quilt sandwiches will have this inside. Now we take our back layer. You're not trying to envision exactly where this goes. Here's another job of the outer portion of the batting buddy. This is telling me, it's framing it. Isn't that just brilliant? I think that when I saw the video on this initially here several months back, I was like, that is just brilliant. That is so smart that now it's exactly where it should be. Simply lift this off, place your patchwork on top, and this is where the cool pins will come into play once again. And you're simply pinning in the areas where you won't be sewing. Isn't that so cool how it sets it up over and over? And you repeat this process until you have a total of 63 quilt sandwiches. Super fun. I love that once you kind of get your first ones down, you really don't need to be referring back to the pattern. You're just kind of doing a process. Keep in mind, many quilt kits and patterns make a specific size of a quilt. It just is. Here, you could make this as big as you want. If you have a California king or a king, you can just keep going and going and going and make this as big, as many quilt sandwiches as you want. We just chose, there's nothing magic about us choosing 7 by 9 other than it fit well on the studio, but you make it as big as you want for whatever you're doing it for. So now we've created our quilt sandwiches, and you're going to do this again and again till as many you need to make your quilt. This is where we are now going to just sew. We prefer to just sew from here straight off, and I have my next quilt sandwich. Remember the ones? In this case, I'd have red loaded into my machine, and I would get all of my red quilt sandwiches, just one after the other after the other. Simply sewing on the shortened stitch length of a 2.15 or something in that ballpark, 2 to 2.15. Just keep sewing those together until you have them sewn. Okay, and let me remove those real quick. Now I've done one other quilt sandwich here in advance so that I could show you. It's going to be a little bit harder for you to see, so I'll make sure I have this one. This one, you probably can't see the marks, but I can see. It's harder to do on the blue fabric. If you feel like you need to come back with a white, like the sew line, and mark your spots, go ahead and do it. Or maybe you're working with black fabric. Use the white sew line, something, or chalk to mark your spots. But remember that when we get ready to sew our quilt sandwiches together, remember this is the back of my project right now, this is the back. In this instance, you can't tell the front or the back, right? Because in these squares, the front and the back's the same. But let's pretend this is the back of it because we know this is the back. Remember, back to back, we're going to pin, and now I need to sew only from dot to dot. Now, I am not used to what does a 1-inch seam allowance look like. I'm going to give you 2 ways to accomplish this. The ideal seam gauge is when I'm ever sewing a seam allowance that is not something I'm used to seeing. I'm used to seeing a 1/4 inch all day long. I'm not used to seeing a 1/2, and I'm most certainly not used to seeing a 1 inch. So I'm going to show you how I use the seam guide to lock that in, and then I'm going to mark it with my seam guides that are removable. You can place them on your machine. They work with any machine. This is how I set a machine up for that. The other way is you could, by all means, lay a ruler down and simply draw the line and sew on the line, right? However you want to get there. But I'm going to show you the technique if you want to really dial that in a very precise way, or any other seam, any other measurement. Here we go from an 1/8, scant, 1/4, 1/4, 3/8, 1/2, 5/8, 3/4, 1, 1 1/4, and 1 1/2. Wow, all of that in one tool and how to use this. So I'm going to kind of come over here and try to get close and show you how to use this tool. This may be something you find useful for this project and many others. To use the seam guide, you can see we have all of the different measurements and you can see all of the holes. The first time I ever tried to use a seam guide, it kind of got high-centered because the feed dogs are up. So if you have an ability to cover the feed dogs, or in this case the BERNINA, I can push the switch on the right side and it lowers the feed dogs so that now I'm truly right in contact with the throat plate. So the first thing we want to do, and be very careful here, slow, is I hand crank the needle into that hole. It's a little one, so you have to kind of get right in line with it. There we go. All right, now this can go anywhere. So the first thing I try to do is make sure that the guide is running parallel with the throat plate. Once you feel that it is, you're going to lower your presser foot so that it's right on top of the gauge so it's not going anywhere. In this case, I kind of have a setting right now that the BERNINA kind of lifts up slightly so it's easier to do chain stitching. But I would disable that so it's trapping it. But for our purposes, we'll keep going. The point is that we know that along this edge right now, with this even being held just parallel, that if I laid my seam guide, a piece of tape or something down, I would know that this is from here, my needle to this edge is 1 inch. Now, my seam guide, this is my secret weapon. This thing is a few dollars, and these comes with a 6-pack that will go with any machine. In this case, I would put down not just one guide, I want to put 2. I would either build a ridge of this because it's a higher pile with flannel, and if you felt the need to do 2 more here, you could, but this is a fantastic way to create that boundary. If your fabric is touching the edge of this as it's feeding in, you're at a 1-inch seam allowance. So I think it's an amazing tool. These have been around a very long time. I think they're underutilized, and knowing that, you know, maybe there are times you want a scant 1/4 or an 1/8. Where is that? It helps you absolutely set that on any machine you have, and this locks in that measurement, because it's great to know where this is, but you have to put a boundary there so you can go back. Okay, now that we have our guides down, we know what we're doing, it's lining it perfectly. Start here, back stitch, sew down to the other dot, back stitch, and clip our thread. We better bring up those feed dogs if we want something to happen here. There we go. Let's get started. So let's back stitch. Okay, and now we have 2 that are back to back, and this is that upper portion, right? And you keep making your quilt sandwiches. How fun is this? And this, of course, is the stuff that ends up being ragged. Okay, so super fun, easy to do. Our instructions, depending on the size of quilt you're doing, if you're going to be doing the same as us, we did 7 across the top, 9 down. You're just continuing to make these and assembling that way. You could do groups of 2. I like doing groups of 2. Obviously, 7's an odd number, so maybe there's a group of 2, another group of 2, and a group of 3. But you're joining them all the same way. And then, of course, you're moving on to joining the kind of the different rows. And then we're doing our clipping of our corners. We're doing our snipping into the washing machine. It goes, but the dryer is where the magic happens. So for the assembly and kind of the notching that we do in the corners and kind of some tips and techniques, I covered that on the first video. So be sure to check that out. I primarily wanted to let you know you don't have to have just squares. You can get fancy. You can start doing 4-patch. You could do pinwheels. You could do really any block you want, right? That you want, and then maybe an alternating plain block, or they're all fancy blocks and the seams are up on the top and they're all ragged and fluffy and wonderful. The point is, rag quilts are a lot of fun. They're easy to make. One of my favorite things is I don't have to send this out for quilting right now. It's done. I get to use it tonight. So many times I get a quilt top done, I pick my backing, choose my batting, and send it off to a quilter. It might be a month. I've waited as long as 3 months, especially at Christmas time. So rag quilts are awesome because you have a finished quilt tonight. So they're one of my favorites. So if you haven't already picked up the batting buddy, you can see there's really endless possibilities. Be sure to pick that up. Works beautifully with the spinning mat. The other things that are going to be very important to you, you noticed I used a 60 millimeter. That's because as the flannel gets thicker and we cut more layers at a time or more layers of batting at once with the middle portion of the batting buddy, the 60 millimeter, this is a very mission specific, perfect rotary cutter for working with flannel quilts. And of course, I think the Perfect 5 is great for fussy cutting those if you're going to be doing the patchwork that we did. Be sure to pick up whichever rag scissors you like. We either have the Kai's or we have this brand here. They're both fantastic. And of course, your cool pins. But be sure to check out the flannel and share your project. We actually get very excited to see what people do. Many times you have a finished quilt kit here and your quilt's going to look just like mine. In this instance, I don't know what you're going to choose. I don't know what you're going to make, but we absolutely want to see it. So please engage with us on social media. We absolutely love hearing from you, and thank you for giving me part of your day to show you the next level of what the Batty Buddy can produce with maybe some fun patchwork blocks. I look forward to seeing you soon on another Shabby video.